At my daughter's elegant dinner party, she introduced me to everyone. This is my caretaker. I keep him around to help with the kids and the chores. The room went dead silent. Everyone looked at me with this mix of pity and discomfort. But then her boss's hand froze mid-air, his wine glass trembling in his grip. He said just one sentence that didn't just ruin my daughter's career. It tore down every lie she'd built over the years. My daughter looked like she was about to faint. I'm so glad you're here. Where are you watching from? Drop your location in the comments. If this kind of suspense gets under your skin, you're not alone. Let's get into it. I was standing in the corner of the most upscale restaurant in Manhattan. The last gift Eleanor ever gave me, those silver cufflinks, were catching the light from the crystal chandeliers. That light felt so fragile, so far away. The laughter of the high society crowd felt like a glass wall I couldn't break through. I held a tray of drinks, a white cloth draped over my forearm, moving with the precision of a man who had done this 1,000 times. This is Theodore, our caretaker. Victoria's voice was crisp and confident, cutting right through the small talk. She didn't even look at me when she said it. The entire table nodded absent-mindedly, as if I were just an expensive piece of furniture. Kenneth, her husband, smirked, taking a sip of wine, a bottle that cost more than the monthly pension they were supposed to be managing for me. But just then I locked eyes with a man at the far end of the table. His expression was pure shock. He clearly recognized a man who had no business being in that room. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to the day that changed everything 3 years ago. It was an autumn afternoon in the Hamptons. The leaves had turned that incredible shade of red, and the air was filled with the scent of wood smoke and the salt from the ocean. Eleanor and I were walking in the garden behind our estate, the same garden we designed together 25 years ago, back when we were just two young people with drafting tables and big dreams. She stopped to admire the maple trees, her hand resting lightly on my arm. "Look at that, Theodore," she said softly. "Isn't it beautiful?" I smiled. "Not as beautiful as you." She laughed. God, I can still hear that laugh. Then her hand tightened on my arm, not from affection, but from pain. "Eleanor?" Her eyes widened, full of confusion, and then she collapsed. Just like that. 1 second she was standing beside me, the next she was in my arms, her breathing shallow and weak, her face turning pale. I shouted for help, called 911, and held her as tight as I could, but it was no use. By the time the ambulance arrived, she was gone. Hidden heart condition, the doctor said later. She never showed symptoms. She never complained. And now she was just gone. At 57, I was a man who had lost his foundation. I was an architect without a blueprint. Eleanor had been my partner in everything, in business, in life, in love. We'd started with sketches on a kitchen table and built a $95 million empire. We raised Victoria together. We dreamt together. And now, standing in that garden surrounded by red leaves, it felt like my entire world had been erased. The funeral is a blur in my memory. Hundreds of people came, business partners, old clients, friends from the country club, but I barely remember their faces. I only remember standing by the grave, staring at that mahogany casket, thinking that it should have been me inside it. I remember the weight of Victoria's hand on mine. "Dad," she whispered, her voice choking up, "come live with us. Kenneth and I will take care of you. You shouldn't be alone." I looked at her, my only child, 33 years old, dressed in black, perfectly polished, her eyes red from crying. In that moment, she looked so much like Eleanor, it made it hard to breathe. "Are you sure?" I asked. "Of course, Dad. We're family. We'll look after you." I believed her. I needed to believe her. I needed a place to go, a place away from the crushing emptiness of Eleanor's absence. So I said yes. I packed a few things from the Hamptons estate, my clothes, a few photos, Eleanor's silver cufflinks, and moved into Victoria and Kenneth's home. That was the first mistake I made. For the first few months, things seemed fine. Victoria was attentive. Kenneth was polite, and their twin boys, Jackson and Noah, were a bright spot in the darkness. I helped with chores, played with the kids, and tried to make myself useful. I thought I was healing. I thought I was finding a new normal. But slowly, things started to change. At first, they were small things. Victoria would ask me to pick up groceries, then cook dinner, then clean up after the kids. Kenneth started making jokes about how lucky I was to have a place to stay. I told myself it was fine. I told myself I was contributing, that I was helping. I told myself I wasn't a burden. I should have seen it coming. Now, 3 years later, I stand in this restaurant, watching my daughter introduce me to a room full of strangers as our caretaker. I watch Kenneth smirk into his wine glass. I watch the man at the end of the table staring at me like he's seen a ghost. And I'm reminded of Eleanor's cufflinks, still catching the light. Victoria promised she would take care of me. I believed her. That was my first mistake. Over the next 6 months, she delivered on that promise in the worst possible way. In those first months after Eleanor passed, Victoria seemed to really care. Maybe I was just so deep in grief that I couldn't see the truth. Those first weeks were a haze. I'd wake up at 3 a.m., forgetting for a split second that Eleanor was gone, reaching across the bed for her. The twins would slide drawings under my door, pictures of Grandpa and 2 boys under a smiling sun. Victoria would check on me, bring me coffee, and ask if I'd eaten. Kenneth, while distant, was at least civil. It felt like kindness. It felt like family. I should have seen it coming. The shift started so slowly, I didn't even notice. That's how the best traps work, isn't it? You don't throw the frog directly into boiling water. You heat it up 1 degree at a time. By the 4th month, I was starting to function again. I started taking morning walks on the beach, considering consulting again, maybe reconnecting with old colleagues. That was when Victoria came to me with a stack of papers. "Dad, let me handle the bills for you, will you?" she said, placing the files on the kitchen table with a sympathetic smile. "You have enough to worry about. Estate taxes, property management, investment accounts. It's all so tedious. Let me handle it so you can focus on healing." It sounded reasonable. I was tired. The paperwork felt overwhelming. So I signed the power of attorney, thinking it was only temporary, thinking she was just helping me out. That was the first brick in the wall being built around me. Kenneth started filling my wine cellar with 18-year-old Macallan and 30-year-old Glenfiddich, delivering cases every few weeks. He joked about upgrading my collection. He moved his gaming rig into my office, the room with the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the ocean, the room where Eleanor and I used to sit until late at night drawing up plans. He called it his man cave now. I told myself it was fine. I wasn't using the space anyway. By the end of the first year, I realized that when Victoria hosted dinner parties, I was no longer sitting at the table. I was in the kitchen plating food, pouring wine, and loading the dishwasher, while her friends laughed and chatted in the other room. When did that start? I can't pinpoint the exact moment. It just happened. "Theodore, can you get more ice?" "Theodore, the Hendersons are out of wine." "Theodore, the kids need a bath." It was never Dad, always Theodore, like I was hired help. By the 2nd year, I was a ghost in my own home. I did laundry, scrubbed floors, and drove Jackson and Noah to soccer practice and piano lessons. When Victoria's friends walked past me in the hallway, they wouldn't make eye contact, as if acknowledging my existence would be awkward. I was a fixture of the house, useful but invisible. One afternoon, I found all my things, my photos, Eleanor's jewelry box, my architecture awards, packed into cardboard boxes in the garage. My master bedroom, the one Eleanor and I had shared for 20 years, had been turned into Victoria's walk-in closet. Rows of designer clothes, racks of shoes, and a vanity with lights just like a Hollywood dressing room. "Oh, we needed more space," Victoria said when I asked. "You don't mind, do you? You barely use that attic room anyway." The attic room, the cramped guest room with the sloped ceiling and the single window looking out over the driveway. That's where I live now. Not the master suite, not even a decent guest room, but the attic. I stood there, staring at the spot where my bed used to be, now covered in Chanel bags and Louis Vuitton heels, and I felt something snap inside me. Not completely broken, but fractured. 6 months ago, as I walked past Victoria's study, I heard her on the phone. I didn't mean to eavesdrop, but the door was open. "Honestly, he's pretty useful," she said, her tone light, almost amused. "Free childcare, and he keeps the house spotless. Why wouldn't we keep him around?" She laughed. I don't remember walking away. I don't remember going back to the attic room. I only remember sitting on the edge of that narrow bed, staring at my hands. Hands that had designed skyscrapers. Hands that held Eleanor when she passed. Hands that built a $95 million empire from nothing. And now these hands were scrubbing toilets. I thought about that power of attorney I'd signed. I thought about the master bedroom turned into a closet. I thought about Kenneth using my office as a game room and my wine cellar as his private stash. I thought about the light laugh in Victoria's voice. Free childcare. Keeps the house spotless. Why wouldn't we keep him around? I'd spent 2 years telling myself this was just temporary. Telling myself Victoria was helping me. Telling myself I was contributing to the household. Telling myself this is what family does. But family doesn't treat you like hired help. Family doesn't erase you from your own home. Family doesn't talk about keeping you around because you're useful. I stood up and walked downstairs. The house was quiet. Victoria and Kenneth had taken the kids to a birthday party. I walked slowly through the rooms, as if seeing them for the first time. The living room where I'm not allowed to sit because the furniture is for guests. The dining room where I serve but don't eat. The kitchen where I work but don't belong. The office that isn't mine anymore. The wine cellar filled with Kenneth's expensive taste. The master bedroom. My bedroom. Eleanor's bedroom turned into a shrine to Victoria's vanity. I stood at the threshold of the walk-in closet, surrounded by designer tags and the faint scent of expensive perfume. This was the room where Eleanor died in my arms. Well, not literally, but close enough. We'd spent our last night here, talking about retirement, about travel, about finally slowing down, and now it was stuffed with shoes. I felt the patience I had worn thin over 2 years finally run dry. It wasn't pain anymore. It was something harder, clearer, and colder than pain. It was resolve. I wouldn't be the frog in the boiling water anymore. I was going to jump out, and when I did, I was going to make sure the people who put me in that water knew exactly what they had done. Victoria thought she had me trapped. She thought I was broken, defeated, and too sad to fight back. She had no idea who I used to be, and she was about to find out. The first time I truly saw who my daughter had become was the night she tried to wipe me from the history of my own home. It was a Thursday night. Victoria was hosting her book club. 8 women from the country club. Designer handbags and expensive highlights everywhere. They were gathered in the living room I had designed with Eleanor, back when Victoria was still in elementary school. I was carrying tea and finger sandwiches, moving quietly between the chairs like a ghost in my own home. "My goodness, this estate is absolutely stunning, Victoria," one of the women said, gesturing to the vaulted ceilings, the custom woodwork, and the floor-to-ceiling windows that framed the ocean view. Victoria smiled, the elegant hostess. "Thank you," she said. "Kenneth and I bought it 5 years ago. It needed a major overhaul, but we really made it our own style." My hand froze in midair, the teapot hovering over Mrs. Henderson's cup. 5 years ago. 5 years ago, Eleanor was still alive. 5 years ago, this house had been our home for 20 years. I designed every inch of it. The curved staircase, the library with the hidden bar, the sunroom where Eleanor grew her orchids. I spent 2 years working with contractors, architects, and craftsmen to build this place from the ground up. We moved in when Victoria was 7, and now she was sitting there, telling her friends that she and Kenneth bought it. "Dear Victoria," Mrs. Henderson said, "you have such an eye for design." "Oh, I can't take all the credit," Victoria said modestly. "We hired a wonderful interior designer. She helped us modernize everything." I looked around the room as if seeing it for the first time. The walls that once held family photos, me and Eleanor at our wedding, portraits of Victoria as a child, vacation and holiday snapshots, were all covered by oversized abstract paintings. Cold, soulless. The fireplace mantel that once held Eleanor's collection of antique books now held geometric sculptures and minimalist vases. They didn't just redecorate, they erased us. I carefully set down the teapot and walked out of the room. No one noticed. I stood in the hallway, back against the wall, trying to steady my breathing. This was my house, my blueprint, my vision. And Victoria was rewriting the story, casting herself as the creator, and what was I? A prop, a servant that came with the furniture. Just then I heard Victoria's voice in the foyer. "Yes, that one," she was saying, her tone filled with disgust. "It doesn't fit the aesthetic anymore. Can you have your team move it to the storage room this weekend?" I followed the voice and found her standing with a young woman holding an iPad. The interior designer, I presumed. They were looking at Eleanor's chair. It was a velvet armchair in the reading nook by the window, deep burgundy with carved wooden legs and a high back. That was a gift from Eleanor for my 50th birthday, 6 years before she passed. She had it custom made, joking that I needed a throne worthy of the king of architecture. I had spent countless nights in that chair, reading, drawing, watching the sun set over the water. "Wait," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. "Leave the chair." Victoria turned around, her expression flashing with a moment of irritation, then quickly smoothing out into, if you didn't know her, what might have passed for sympathy. "Dad, we're updating the space. That chair was a gift from Eleanor. I know, but Mom is gone, and you need to move on." She glanced at the designer, then back at me, her voice dropping to a lower, more condescending register. "It's been 3 years. Holding on to old furniture isn't going to bring her back." I stared at my daughter, at this woman who looked so much like the little girl I'd pushed on swings, taught to ride a bike, and walked down the aisle at her wedding. I didn't recognize her. "That chair isn't going anywhere," I said. "Actually," Victoria said, her tone turning cold, "it has to go. This is my house now, Dad. You signed the power of attorney. Remember, you put me in charge of everything. Finances, property management, everything. So if I say the chair goes to storage, it goes to storage." The designer looked uncomfortable, her gaze shifting between us. "You can keep your books and photos in your room," Victoria continued, her voice now sharp, lacking any pretense of kindness. "But the rest of the house needs to reflect my taste. If you don't like it, you're welcome to go find somewhere else to live." She looked me straight in the eye, challenging me. I thought about the power of attorney I'd signed 18 months ago. I thought about those legal documents I'd never read closely, trusting her when she said it was just to help manage things. I thought about how my name was still on the deed, or at least I hoped it was. I realized I didn't actually know what Victoria had done with those documents. "Fine," I said calmly. Victoria blinked, surprised. She had expected an argument. "Take the chair," I continued. "Do whatever you want with it." Her expression shifted into something approaching triumph. "I'm glad you can be so reasonable about this." I nodded and turned away. Behind me, I heard her instructing the designer to book the moving company. I didn't go back to the book club. I didn't return to my attic room. I walked into the garden I had planted with Eleanor, the one with the red maples that turned so brilliant in the autumn. I stood there until the sun went down, the guests left, and the house fell quiet. I didn't let Victoria take the chair because I believed her lies. I didn't back down because I thought she was right. I let her take the chair because I needed time. Time to think, time to plan, and time to call the only person who could tell me the truth about what I had actually signed and what rights I still had. The next morning, while Victoria was at the gym and Kenneth was sleeping off a hangover in what used to be my office, I walked into the small storage closet under the attic stairs. It was the one place they never bothered to check. I pulled out the box containing Eleanor's important documents, our marriage certificate, property deeds, estate papers. Then I made the phone call I should have made 2 years ago. "Hayes and Associates. How can I direct your call?" "Please connect me to Patricia Hayes," I said. My voice was steady. "Tell her Theodore Sterling is calling. It's an emergency." The next morning the call was made. What Patricia told me changed everything. Moments later, 2 men in expensive suits showed up to have a talk with Kenneth. Patricia Hayes had been our family lawyer for 20 years. Her voice was sharp with concern. "Theodore, listen carefully. A power of attorney doesn't transfer ownership. It just gives someone the authority to manage finances, pay bills, and handle transactions. But the house, your assets, are 100% yours. Unless you've signed a deed transfer, which requires notarization and filing with the county, that house is legally still yours." A wave of relief washed over me, followed by a cold, sharp anger. Victoria had been lying for months. "There's one more thing," Patricia said. "If Victoria is being this aggressive about trying to control your assets, she might be planning to file for a conservatorship. That's when a court declares someone mentally incapable and appoints a guardian to take complete control of everything. She would need medical evidence, but Theodore, if she's already rewriting history and isolating you, that might be her ultimate goal. Get a full physical immediately. Cognitive tests, psychiatric evaluations, anything that can prove you're sound of mind, and document everything. I'm already documenting everything. Good. And Theodore, be careful. If she realizes you're collecting evidence, she might speed up her timeline. Over the next few days, I turned into a ghost. I moved quietly, observed, and listened. I hid a journal in the storage closet under the attic stairs, documenting every dismissive remark and every transaction I could track down. That was when I found the withdrawals. $75,000 taken from the family account in 6 months. Another $53,000 from the savings account. Every single transfer bore Victoria's signature. I was reviewing the bank statements when the doorbell rang. 2 men stood on the porch. They were in their 40s, wearing tailored suits. They didn't look like salesmen. "Good afternoon," the taller one said politely. "We're looking for Kenneth. Is he home?" "Who's asking?" "Friends of Frankie," the lean one said, smiling without a shred of warmth. "Kenneth knows who we are." I heard footsteps behind me. Kenneth went pale, freezing on the stairs. "Gentlemen," he said, his voice tight, "this isn't a good time." "Frankie thinks now is an excellent time," the taller one said. $1.5 million is a long time to wait for 6 months. $1.5 million. Kenneth's eyes darted to me. "I'm working on it. Tell Frankie I'm working on it. He knows. By the way, nice place." The thin one glanced at the marble foyer. "Maybe sell some things. Speed up the process." The taller one handed Kenneth a business card. 2 weeks. Frankie's generosity has limits. After they left, Kenneth gripped the stair railing, his face ashen. I closed the door. $1.5 million, I said calmly. "How? Poker? Sports betting?" His voice was hollow. I thought I could win it back. It just spiraled. Victoria knows." He nodded. "She's been using your accounts to pay them off. We've already given them $400,000. $400,000 with my money." "She told me you had signed everything over," Kenneth said, his voice trembling, "and that you wanted her to manage it." She had lied to both of us. I saw true fear in his eyes. Victoria had him trapped, just as she had trapped me. His cage was built of debt. Mine was built of grief. That night, I heard voices coming from downstairs. I crept to the top of the stairs. "I don't care if he's suspicious." Victoria's voice was sharp and cold. "If he finds out about the accounts, we have to speed this up." "Speed it up? How?" Kenneth sounded panicked. "A conservatorship. I've already consulted with a lawyer. We're filing next month. I'll get someone to testify that he's behaving erratically. Memory loss, confusion, inappropriate anger. Once the court appoints me as his conservator, everything is mine. The house, the investments, everything. Then Frankie gets his money. Victoria, he's your father. He's an obstacle." I stood in the darkness, my hand white-knuckled on the railing. They were planning to have me declared incompetent, to take everything, to erase me completely. I went back to my room and pulled out the hidden journal. I recorded everything I had just heard, word for word. Then I looked at the evidence I had collected. Bank statements, audio recordings, and photos from before Victoria had erased our family from the house. Patricia had warned me Victoria might accelerate her timeline, which meant I had to move faster too. Tomorrow, I needed 2 things: a medical evaluation proving I was sound of mind, and a way to protect my assets before Victoria could file. Tomorrow, the counterattack would truly begin. Patricia had warned me that Victoria might try to have me legally declared mentally incompetent. I needed proof that the reality was the exact opposite. Just then, Victoria announced a dinner party that would change everything. The morning after eavesdropping on Victoria's conservatorship plans, I did something I hadn't done in 3 years. I left the house without telling anyone. I hailed an Uber from the beach, access half a mile from the estate, and sat in silence all the way to Manhattan. As long as I didn't drive my own car, Victoria couldn't track me. Kenneth was hungover again. No one would notice I was gone. Dr. Alan Rodriguez's office was in a glass building near Central Park. Patricia had recommended him, a neuropsychologist with an impeccable reputation, whose testimony would hold up in any courtroom. "Mr. Sterling," he said, shaking my hand. He was a professional in his 50s with kind eyes behind gold-rimmed glasses. Patricia had already explained the situation. We're going to be very comprehensive today. Cognitive function tests, memory assessments, psychological evaluations. It will take about 3 hours. Whatever it takes, I said. He guided me through a series of tests. The Montreal Cognitive Assessment, clock drawing tests, word recall, pattern recognition. He had me count backward from 100 by sevens. He showed me images and had me memorize them. He asked about my life, my work, and my recent experiences. I told him about Eleanor, about designing this house, about Victoria erasing our history from the walls, about the power of attorney, the stolen money, Kenneth's gambling debts, the loan sharks, and the conversation I'd overheard about the conservatorship. Dr. Rodriguez took notes, his expression remaining neutral and professional throughout. Finally, after 3 hours, he put his pen down. Mr. Sterling, I'm going to be straight with you. Your cognitive function is excellent. You scored in the 95th percentile for your age group, and that's compared to healthy individuals, not just the general population. Your memory is sharp. Your logic is tight. You have no signs of dementia, no depression severe enough to impair judgment, and no other condition that could support a conservatorship filing. The sense of relief was so intense that I had to grip the arms of my chair. I will prepare a comprehensive report, he continued. If anyone tries to question your mental capacity in court, this document will be ironclad. By every clinical metric, you are completely sound of mind. Thank you, I managed to choke out. Patricia also asked me to note one thing in the report, he said, looking me in the eye. The situation you described, the isolation, financial exploitation, being manipulated by family members, those are classic signs of elder abuse. If this goes to court, these things will be on the record as well. I left his office with the sealed envelope containing the medical report and walked through Central Park for the first time in years. The autumn leaves were turning gold and red. Eleanor would have loved this view. I sat on a bench and called Patricia. I have the report, I said. 95th percentile. No signs of cognitive impairment. Perfect. That's your legal armor. Hide it somewhere Victoria can't find it. I will. There's one more thing, I said, taking a deep breath. Victoria announced she's hosting a dinner party next week. She wants to impress someone named Charles Morrison. Apparently, he's a CEO, and she's after an executive VP position at his company. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Charles Morrison, Patricia said slowly. Theodore, do you remember a young architect you mentored 25 years ago? A brilliant kid right out of Columbia. You worked together on the Harbor Towers project. The memory hit me like a physical blow. Charles. 24, enthusiastic, brilliant, hungry to learn. I had spent 2 years teaching him everything I knew. Design principles, client management, how to run a firm. He had called me his mentor, his inspiration. We'd lost touch after I sold the company and he moved into commercial development. But I remembered him clearly. That Charles, I said, the Charles. He's the CEO of Morrison Development now, one of the biggest real estate firms on the East Coast. If Victoria is trying to impress him and she has no idea he knows you, I could hear the calculation in her voice, the same calculation swirling in my mind. Help me get his private number, I said. Theodore, what are you thinking? I'm thinking Victoria is planning to declare me incompetent and steal everything I own. I'm thinking she spent 3 years systematically erasing me from my own life. And I'm thinking next week she intends to introduce her boss to a caretaker, a servant, just like she did at her book club. And you want to make sure Charles knows who you actually are before that happens. I want to make sure Charles knows everything. Patricia was silent for a moment. I'll give you his number, but Theodore, once you make that call, there's no turning back. You're choosing sides. You're choosing to go to war. Victoria chose war the day she tried to erase Eleanor from our house, I said. I've just finally decided to fight back. That night, I returned to the estate. Victoria was in the living room planning the dinner party on her laptop. She didn't even look up as I walked by. Theodore, you need to serve the food that night, she said absently. Cocktails at 7, dinner at 8. Look presentable. Mr. Morrison is very important. Of course, I said. I went upstairs to my attic room and took out the sealed medical report. 95th percentile, completely sound of mind, legal armor against the conservatorship filing. I stuffed it into the hidden box in my closet, along with the journal, the bank statements, and the recordings. Then I looked at the text message Patricia had sent me an hour ago. A phone number, 10 digits that were enough to change everything. There was 1 week until the dinner party, 1 week to reach Charles, 1 week to decide whether to simply expose Victoria's lies or to orchestrate a more devastating counterstrike. That night, I chose revenge. Calling Charles was a gamble. 25 years is a long time. People change. He might not remember me. He might not care. He might be just as ambitious and cold-hearted as Victoria and end up siding with her instead. But I had to try, because Victoria had spent 3 years turning me into a ghost, and I was about to remind her and everyone else who I really was. Calling Charles Morrison was a risk. 5 days later, I stood at the dinner party, playing the part of the caretaker one last time. Tonight, I would remind Victoria who the true owner of this house was. 3 days after getting the medical report, I dialed Charles's private number from my car in a grocery store parking lot. "This is Charles Morrison." "Charles, this is Theodore Sterling. I don't know if you remember me, but 25 years ago—" "Mr. Sterling!" His voice trembled. "Is it really you? I heard you were in a nursing home. Someone said you had dementia." Victoria had been spreading lies, laying the groundwork for her conservatorship filing. "I'm not in a nursing home," I said. "I'm living with my daughter, and I need to tell you what's actually happening." I told him everything. The power of attorney, the erasure from my own house, the stolen money, and Victoria's plan to declare me incompetent. I also told him about the dinner party, how she was going to use him to advance her career, and how she'd introduced me to friends as a caretaker. "She called you a caretaker?" Charles's voice shook with anger. "You are Theodore Sterling. When no other firm would hire a kid right out of Columbia, you gave me my first real break in this industry. You taught me everything. I've spent 25 years trying to live up to the standard you set. Charles, Mr. Sterling, tell me, what do you want me to do? Come to the dinner. Act normal. Let Victoria play her games. When the time is right, I'll give you a signal." Now, 5 days later, that moment had arrived. Crystalline candlelight shimmered in the dining room. Victoria had hired caterers, a bartender, and even a pianist. These 8 guests would decide her promotion. "Theodore," Victoria whispered a warning, "you stay in the back. You serve the drinks. You clear the plates. Don't speak unless you're spoken to. Do not embarrass me." "Of course." Kenneth stood by the fireplace, looking miserable. He'd been jumpy ever since the loan shark showed up. Victoria believed this dinner would fix everything. Having Charles Morrison as an ally meant a bigger deal, enough to pay back Frankie, if only she knew the truth. The guests arrived at 7. Victoria was the perfect hostess, charming in a black cocktail dress. I moved through the room with champagne, acting invisible. Charles Morrison arrived at 7:30, taller than I remembered, with gray at his temples, wearing a perfectly tailored navy suit. His eyes found me immediately. 1 second of connection was enough to see the anger hidden beneath his professional smile. Then he looked away. "Mr. Morrison," Victoria said, stepping forward, "thank you so much for coming." "My pleasure. Your house is beautiful." "Thank you. We bought it 5 years ago and did a complete renovation." The lie slipped off her tongue effortlessly. She guided him into the living room. I was at the bar, topping off glasses. A woman with a pearl necklace scanned between Charles, me, and Victoria. "Is this your father?" Victoria's smile didn't flinch. "Oh, no. This is Theodore, our caretaker. He helps out with the household chores." Charles's jaw tightened. He gripped his champagne glass so hard I thought he'd shatter it. "Your caretaker," he repeated. His voice kept deliberately neutral. "Yes, he's been with us for a few years." Victoria turned to me, her tone dismissive. "Theodore, can you go see if the appetizers are ready?" I retreated to the kitchen. Behind me, Victoria laughed, guiding Charles toward the other guests, and launching into her vision for the executive VP position. She had no idea whose side he was actually on. Dinner was announced at 8. The guests took their seats. Victoria sat at the head of the table, Charles as the guest of honor to her right, and Kenneth across from them, pale and restless. I served the first course, seared scallops. Everyone was complimenting food that Victoria hadn't cooked. I moved around the table, topping off wine, clearing plates. Charles and I locked eyes once, and I gave a slight shake of my head. Not yet. Patience. Victoria needed to feel safe, confident, triumphant. She needed to believe she had already won. Dessert was served. Port was poured. Just as Victoria was mid-sentence about her latest deal, I caught Charles's attention and gave a slight nod toward the kitchen. He understood. I set down the tray, untied my apron, and walked into the kitchen. For the first time in 3 years, I was no longer Caretaker Theodore. I was Theodore Sterling, architect, builder, mentor. I straightened my tie, smoothed my shirt, and took a deep breath. When I walked back into that dining room, everything had changed. It wasn't that the guests in the room had changed. They were still laughing, still holding their glasses of port. But I had changed. My posture, my movements. I was no longer serving. Charles Morrison saw me first. He set down his glass and stood up slowly. One by one, the other guests noticed, and the conversation died away. Victoria looked at Charles, confused. "Mr. Morrison, is something wrong?" Charles smiled. It wasn't the polite, professional smile he'd worn all night. It was something warmer, more real. Charles stood, prepared to introduce a legend. Victoria had no idea what was coming next. The next 60 seconds would shatter everything. Charles Morrison stood with his glass, his voice carrying through the silent dining room. "Before we continue, I'd like to introduce you all to a legend." He pointed at me. "This is Theodore Sterling. What Victoria hasn't told you is that 25 years ago, when no other firm would hire a kid fresh out of Columbia, this man gave me my first real opportunity in architecture. He is not a caretaker. He is one of the most brilliant architects of his generation. He designed Harbor Towers, the Riverside Complex, and half the skyline you can see from this very window. This house we're sitting in, he and his late wife, Eleanor, designed and built it 30 years ago." Every head in the room turned toward me. The woman with the pearl necklace looked stunned. She had asked me if I was Victoria's father earlier, only to accept the caretaker lie without question. Victoria's face went white, but she quickly recovered, forcing a smile. "Charles, I think there's been some confusion here. Dad, you're embarrassing our guests." She turned to the table, her smile frozen. "My father can be a bit confused sometimes. I call him our caretaker as a term of endearment. He helps out around the house, and we love having him here." "A term of endearment," I said calmly. It was the first time I'd spoken at a dinner table in 3 years. Everyone froze. I pulled out my phone, the old iPhone I'd kept hidden, which contained all my recordings. I scrolled to the file from 6 months ago where I'd overheard Victoria, on the phone. I pressed play. Victoria's voice rang clearly through the room. "Honestly, he's pretty useful. Free childcare, and he keeps the house spotless. The old man has already signed all the papers over to me. Why wouldn't we keep him around?" Absolute silence followed. Victoria's carefully applied makeup couldn't hide the color draining from her face. Kenneth stiffened in his chair, staring at his plate as if it offered an escape route. Charles set his glass down very carefully. When he spoke, his voice was cold and professional. "Victoria, I think before we discuss any executive VP position, we need to have a serious conversation about professional ethics and integrity. Perhaps we should schedule that for another time, a very distant time." The message was clear. She was out. The dinner party broke up shortly after that. The guests made awkward excuses, thanked Victoria with forced politeness, and left. A few gave me sympathetic looks as they passed. The woman with the pearl necklace stopped and whispered, "I'm so sorry. I should have seen it." Kenneth disappeared, probably to hide in his man cave with a bottle of expensive whiskey. Charles was the last to leave. He shook my hand at the door. "Mr. Sterling, if you need any legal support, a place to stay, anything at all, call me." "Thank you, Charles. I mean that. You changed my life. Now it's time for me to return the favor." After he left, the house was silent. I stood in the foyer, still holding the phone with the recording. I had won. Victoria's lies were exposed in front of the person most capable of affecting her career. Charles Morrison would make sure this story spread throughout the industry. Her reputation was destroyed. I should have felt the joy of victory. Instead, I felt a cold dread spreading in my stomach. "You ruined me!" Victoria's scream came from the living room. I turned to find her standing there, mascara running down her cheeks, shaking with rage. "Do you have any idea what you just did? That was my career, my future, everything I worked for." "Everything you worked for?" I said calmly. "Or everything you stole? I gave you a home. After your mother passed, I looked after you, and you treated me like your servant. You erased me from my own house. You tried to steal everything Eleanor and I built." "It was supposed to be mine!" she shouted. "You were too grief-stricken to handle it. Someone had to take over." "So you took over with lies and manipulation? You want to talk about lies?" Victoria's voice dropped to a cold, dangerous register. "Fine. Then let's talk about consequences. If you continue down this path, if you continue to work against me, I will make sure you never see Jackson and Noah again." My blood froze instantly. "That's right," she laughed, but there was no warmth in it. "I'll take them to the other side of the country, California or Oregon, somewhere you'll never find them. I'll make sure they forget you exist, just like I erased you from these walls." I couldn't speak. The grandsons were the only bright spot in these last 3 years. The drawings Jackson slid under my door, Noah's questions about architecture, teaching them both to appreciate the ocean view in this house I'd built with my own hands. "You're using the children as weapons," I said, my voice barely steady. "I'm protecting my family from a bitter, resentful old man who's trying to destroy their mother." Victoria's tone became calculating. "That's what I'll say in court, regardless of the truth. Who do you think they'll believe? A successful executive protecting her young children, or an aging father with a documented history of mental instability?" She turned and walked away, her heels clicking sharply against the marble floor. "Think carefully before you make your next move, Dad." I stood alone in the foyer of the house I had designed with my own hands. Victory tasted like ash in my mouth. I had exposed Victoria's lies, but she had revealed her ultimate nuclear weapon, my grandsons, and a conservatorship filing masquerading as concern for their welfare. That night, I lay on my narrow attic bed, staring at the ceiling. At midnight, I heard Victoria's voice through the thin walls. She was on the phone. "Yes, as soon as possible. Tomorrow, the conservatorship filing. I need the documents ready." Pause. "No, we have to move fast. He's getting legal advice. I can't risk him protecting his assets. First thing Monday, file it at the county courthouse." Another pause. "The medical evaluation, I'll handle it. I know a doctor willing to testify about erratic behavior, paranoia, and an inability to manage his own affairs. We'll find 3 witnesses who have seen his mental decline." I pressed the recording app on my phone, capturing every word. "And the boys," Victoria continued, her voice cold as ice. "If he fights this, I'll file for a restraining order. Claim he's become emotionally unstable and poses a danger to the children. Once the dust settles, he'll be declared incompetent and barred from seeing his own grandsons. By then, everything will be mine. The house, the money, everything." She hung up. I saved the recording, staring at my phone in the dark. She had lost the battle at the dinner party, but she was preparing for total war, and she was willing to use innocent children, who adored their grandfather, as both a weapon and a shield. I remembered Patricia's warning. Victoria wouldn't just speed up, she was going nuclear, and I had less than 48 hours to stop her. 3 days later, the court papers were served. My daughter had officially filed a petition to have me declared mentally incompetent. This hearing would decide whether I kept control of my life or lost everything. As soon as the process server left, I called Patricia. She actually filed it. "I know, I received my copy as well. They've requested an emergency hearing. It's set for next Tuesday, presided over by Judge Martha Brennan at the Manhattan County Courthouse." Patricia's voice was calm, but I could hear the edge in it. "Theodore, she moved fast. That means she's backed into a corner." "Good. People in corners make mistakes." Throughout the next week, I watched Victoria prepare her case. She was thorough. I had to give her that. She staged photos of my attic room, clothes scattered on the floor, unwashed plates on the nightstand, piles of messy papers. Returning from a walk one afternoon, I saw her photographer friend leaving with a camera. She was fabricating evidence of my supposed mental decline. She also coached Kenneth on his testimony. I overheard their conversation in the living room. Just say he seems confused. Say he repeats himself constantly. Say you're worried he can't handle basic tasks. And the worst part was, she poisoned the grandsons. I heard her speaking to Jackson and Noah in a gentle, worried tone. Grandpa is very sick. His brain isn't working right. He might need to go to a special place where doctors can help him. 7-year-old Jackson looked at me with terrified eyes the next morning. Grandpa, are you being sent away? I knelt and hugged him tight. No, little guy. Grandpa's just fine. But Victoria pulled him away. Come along, darling. Grandpa needs his rest. Tuesday morning, I put on my best suit, the charcoal gray one I used to wear to board meetings when I ran my company. Patricia met me on the courthouse steps. How do you feel? She asked. Like I'm fighting for my life. Good, because you are. Judge Martha Brennan was in her early 60s, hair silver, eyes sharp, missing nothing. She took her seat on the bench, flipped through the petition, and looked up. This is a hearing regarding Victoria Sterling's petition for legal guardianship over her father, Theodore Sterling, on the grounds of mental incapacity. Ms. Hayes, I see you are representing Mr. Sterling. Yes, Your Honor. Very well. We will begin with the petitioner's statement. Victoria's attorney, a sharp woman in an expensive suit, stood and addressed the court with rehearsed empathy. Your Honor, this is a heartbreaking situation. Victoria Sterling is a devoted daughter who has watched with growing concern as her father's mental state has declined. Since the death of his wife 3 years ago, Mr. Sterling has displayed increasingly severe cognitive impairment, memory loss, and an inability to manage his affairs. Miss Sterling has been caring for him at home, but his condition has deteriorated to the point where professional intervention is mandatory. She presented the evidence, those staged, messy photos of the room, bank statements showing large, erratic withdrawals Victoria herself had made, and testimonials from Victoria's friends claiming they had witnessed my mental confusion at a book club. Then Victoria took the stand. She wore a pale blue dress, very little makeup, and clutched a tissue tightly. The performance began immediately. Ms. Sterling, can you describe your father's condition? Victoria's voice trembled. He's not the man he used to be. He broke down after my mother died. He forgets things constantly. Simple things like where he puts his keys or what day it is. Last month, he forgot to turn off the stove and nearly started a fire. I'm terrified something terrible will happen. A total lie. There was no fire, nothing had happened, but she said it with such conviction that I saw the judge's expression soften. He gets confused about people too, Victoria continued, dabbing her eyes. Sometimes he forgets my children's names, his own grandsons, and the paranoia, he's convinced people are stealing his money, that people are conspiring against him. He's made ridiculous accusations against me and my husband. Ridiculous accusations, her lawyer repeated. Can you give an example? He claims I stole his money, that I'm squatting in his house, that I'm trying to... She paused, her voice choking up. It breaks my heart. He's my father. I love him, but he needs help I can't give him. He needs professional care. He needs a guardian who can protect him from himself. It was masterful. Even knowing she was lying, even having lived through the truth, I could see how convincing she was. A grieving daughter, heartbroken by her father's decline, making a painful decision to seek legal help. The judge made notes, her expression unreadable. Thank you, Ms. Sterling. Any other witnesses? Yes, Your Honor. Kenneth Sterling, the respondent's son-in-law. Kenneth walked to the stand like a man heading to the gallows. He wouldn't look at me. Mr. Sterling, you live with the respondent. Have you observed the behaviors Ms. Sterling described? Kenneth swallowed hard. Yes. Theodore seems very confused. He has a hard time remembering things, especially finances. He doesn't seem capable of managing the household accounts anymore. That's why Victoria had to take over. Another lie. Victoria took over because I was foolish enough to sign a power of attorney, which she used to steal $75,000. And in your opinion, does Theodore Sterling require a guardian? Kenneth's hands gripped the railing of the stand. For a second I thought he might tell the truth. His eyes flicked to me, then to Victoria, and finally he hung his head. Yes, he whispered, I believe he does. He stepped down, still refusing to meet my eyes. Victoria's lawyer stood confidently. Your Honor, the evidence is clear. Mr. Sterling is no longer capable of managing his own affairs. For his own safety and well-being, we petitioned the court to grant guardianship to his daughter, Victoria Sterling. She sat down with a faint, imperceptible smirk. Kenneth was ashen and silent. Victoria dabbed at her eyes, the picture of a heartbroken daughter. They thought they had won. Patricia leaned close and whispered, "Ready?" I nodded. It was time for them to see who I really was. The turning point came when Patricia called Dr. Rodriguez to the stand. Then Kenneth broke down completely, and what followed sealed Victoria's fate forever. The defense calls Dr. Alan Rodriguez. Dr. Rodriguez took the stand with the calm authority of a man who had testified in dozens of cases. Patricia established his credentials: neuropsychologist, 23 years of experience, over 5,000 cognitive evaluations, before going straight to the point. Dr. Rodriguez, you evaluated Theodore Sterling 2 weeks ago. What were your findings? Mr. Sterling underwent a comprehensive neuropsychological evaluation, including the Montreal Cognitive Assessment, memory tests, executive function assessment, and psychiatric screening. His results were outstanding. He scored in the 95th percentile for his age group, meaning he performed better than 95% of healthy peers. I found no evidence of dementia, cognitive impairment, depression, or any condition that would impair his ability to manage his own affairs. Victoria's lawyer stood up. Objection. A single evaluation cannot overturn a pattern of decline. Your Honor, Patricia said calmly, I have Dr. Rodriguez's full report here, including brain imaging showing no abnormalities. I also have the testimony of Mr. Sterling's previous primary physician, confirming he has been in excellent health for the last 3 years. But perhaps more importantly, I have evidence that directly contradicts the petitioner's claims. She took out her phone and connected it to the court's audio system. This is a recording Mr. Sterling made 1 week ago. Your Honor, I believe it speaks for itself. She pressed play. Victoria's cold, calculating voice rang out through the courtroom. Yes, as soon as possible. Tomorrow. The conservatorship filing. I need the documents ready. No, we have to move fast. He's getting legal advice. I can't risk him protecting his assets. The medical evaluation, I'll handle it. I know a doctor willing to testify about erratic behavior. We'll find 3 witnesses who have seen his mental decline, and the boys. If he fights this, I'll file for a restraining order. Once the dust settles, he'll be declared incompetent and barred from seeing his own grandsons. By then, everything will be mine. Absolute silence followed. Victoria turned ghostly pale. Her lawyer was scribbling furiously on a notepad. Kenneth looked like he was about to be sick. Judge Brennan's expression had turned icy and severe. She turned toward me. Mr. Sterling, I want to hear from you directly. Do you understand what is happening in this courtroom? I stood up. Yes, Your Honor. My daughter is attempting to have me declared mentally incompetent so she can seize control of my assets. She needs the money because her husband, Kenneth, owes $1.5 million to a loan shark named Frankie. She has already stolen over $75,000 from my accounts without my knowledge to pay off his gambling debts. When that wasn't enough, she decided to take everything. That's not true, Victoria screamed, but her lawyer grabbed her arm. I continued, my voice steady. I have bank statements showing the withdrawals. I have the recording of Victoria planning this conservatorship. I have photos of the evidence she staged to fake my decline. And I have a medical evaluation proving I am completely sound of mind. Judge Brennan nodded slowly. Ms. Hayes, you have financial documents. Your Honor! Kenneth suddenly stood up, his voice breaking. Your Honor, I have to say something. Everyone turned toward him. Victoria grabbed his arm, hissing, Kenneth, sit down! He shoved her hand away. No, I can't take it. I can't do this anymore. He looked at the judge, then at me. Theodore is completely capable. There is nothing wrong with him. Victoria forced me to lie. She told me what to say on the stand. She threatened that if I didn't help her, she would leave me and leave me alone with the loan sharks. Kenneth, Victoria's voice turned shrill with panic. "I'm sorry, Theodore," he said, crying now. "I'm so sorry. All your instincts were right. The gambling, the debt, Victoria stealing your money, it's all true. And you're not confused or forgetful at all. You're clearer than I'll ever be." Judge Brennan held up a hand. "Mr. Sterling, Kenneth Sterling, are you saying you have committed perjury in this courtroom?" "Yes, Your Honor, I lied. Victoria told me to." The judge looked at Victoria, whose face had gone from pale to beet red. "Ms. Sterling, I have heard enough. The petition is denied. Furthermore, I am ordering an immediate investigation into allegations of elder abuse and financial exploitation." She turned to me. "Mr. Theodore Sterling, this court finds you sound of mind and fully capable of managing your own affairs." She turned back to Victoria. "Miss Sterling, I am issuing a temporary order requiring you to vacate Mr. Sterling's property within 72 hours. You are to take nothing but personal effects. You are not to touch his financial accounts. A full accounting of all transactions will be submitted to the district attorney's office for review." Victoria stood, shaking all over. "This is insane. You'd rather believe lies." "Ms. Sterling, I suggest you speak with your attorney before saying anything that might further incriminate you. Court is adjourned." The gavel fell. Victoria grabbed Jackson and Noah, who had been waiting in the hallway with the nanny. She didn't look at me, shoving the confused and scared boys. "Mommy, what's happening?" Jackson asked. "We're leaving now." On the courthouse steps, she finally turned. Her makeup was ruined. Her expensive suit was wrinkled. "You won, Dad. Congratulations. I hope you're happy in that house because you're going to die in it alone." She shoved the boys into the car and drove off. I stood on the courthouse steps in my charcoal gray suit, watching the car disappear at the end of the street. Patricia stood beside me. "You won," she said softly. "Theodore, you got your house back. Your assets are protected. Victoria's lies have been exposed." "I know. Then why do you look like you lost?" I thought of Jackson's terrified eyes, of Noah asking what was happening, of 2 7-year-old boys being forcibly taken from their grandfather just because their mother chose greed over love. That night, I walked through the empty house. Victoria and Kenneth had cleared out their things in a rush. Closet doors were left open, drawers half empty. The master bedroom was mine again. The office was mine, too. The wine cellar, the living room, the garden, all of it, every bit of it was mine. I stand in Eleanor's reading nook, looking at the empty space where the velvet chair used to be. Patricia has already sent someone to the storage unit, and it will be returned tomorrow. I won. I have reclaimed my house, exposed Victoria's lies, protected my assets, and regained my dignity. But why does this victory feel so hollow? I think of something Eleanor said years ago, after an incredibly intense business negotiation where I had ruthlessly crushed a competitor. "What is the point of winning?" she asked gently. "If, in the process, we lose what matters most?" I thought she was being too soft back then. Now, standing alone in this house I designed with her, I understand. But I may have underestimated something. I may have forgotten another of Eleanor's lessons. People will always remember how you treated them, especially children. They remember the truth. Jackson and Noah are small, but they aren't blind. Someday they will grow up. They will ask questions, and they will be old enough to understand everything. I just need to be patient and pray that it isn't too late. The judge ruled in Theodore's favor. He won back his house and his freedom. But watching Victoria drive away with his grandsons, he realized that winning the battle did not mean winning what mattered most. I underestimated one thing. People always remember how you treat them. 3 weeks after Victoria took my grandsons away, my network began to stir, and we prepared for a new kind of battle. The first call came from Charles Morrison. "Mr. Sterling, I heard about what happened in court. I'm so sorry about your grandsons. Is there anything I can do to help? Your testimony at the guardianship hearing already helped more than you know. That was nothing. It was the truth. But I'm serious. What do you need?" I sat in Eleanor's reading nook. Her velvet chair was finally back from storage. "To be honest, I haven't figured it out yet. Patricia is working on the legal strategy for visitation, but beyond that, what about work?" I blinked. "Work?" "Morrison Development is breaking ground on a complex in Brooklyn next spring. Residential towers, retail, public space. It's the biggest project we've ever taken on, and I need a strategic consultant. Someone who knows how to design spaces where life can flourish. He paused. The salary for this part-time position is $200,000. I need your expertise, Mr. Sterling. This isn't charity. It's business. My throat tightened. For 3 years I had been treated as incompetent, useless, and a burden. Charles was offering me meaningful work and respect. I accept, I said softly. When do I start? Next Monday. Welcome back, Mr. Sterling. Patricia called that afternoon with her own news. I'm drafting a petition for grandparents' visitation rights. Under New York law, if you can prove a substantial existing relationship with the children, and that visitation is in their best interest, the court can grant it even if the parents object. Can we win? You have been a consistent presence in Jackson and Noah's lives for 7 years. You lived with them, cared for them, and built a deep bond. The guardianship hearing proved Victoria is manipulative and dishonest. Yes, Theodore, I believe we can win. The hearing is scheduled for 2 weeks from today. 2 weeks, 14 days to build a case that would bring my grandsons back to me. That night, James Sullivan, my private investigator, called with an update. Found her. She's renting a 2-bedroom apartment in Jersey City. Been there 3 weeks. Neighbors say she doesn't interact much. Kenneth is still with her, but he looks terrible. From what I've gathered, his drinking is severe. And Theodore, she's in financial trouble. 2 credit cards are maxed out, no job. Word about the guardianship case has gotten out. How much trouble? Enough that she's going to be desperate very soon. People in corners make mistakes. I logged that information. The next day, Daniel Foster showed up on my doorstep. We worked together 30 years ago before I started my own firm. He had gone on to design museums and cultural centers, winning the awards I had only dreamt of. Theodore, he said, giving me a hug, the entire architectural world has been looking for you. We thought you'd retired to Florida or something. It's a long story. I've heard bits and pieces. Your daughter? I am so sorry. But listen, I'm here for a reason. The Architecture Institute wants to present you with a Lifetime Achievement Award at the Spring Gala. They've been trying to reach you for months. I stared at him. A Lifetime Achievement Award? You designed some of the most iconic buildings on the East Coast. You mentored a generation of architects, including Charles Morrison. The Harbor Towers project changed how we think about residential design. Theodore, you didn't just build buildings. You built a legacy, and we haven't forgotten. After he left, I stood in the foyer of the house I designed with my own hands, looking at the curved staircase, the custom woodwork, the windows framing the ocean view. Victoria had tried to erase me from this house, from my own history. She had isolated me, made me invisible. But she couldn't erase 40 years of hard work. She couldn't erase the respect I had earned, the connections I had built, and the reputation I had spent a lifetime creating. Charles gave me work. Patricia is fighting for my rights. James is gathering intelligence. Daniel is restoring my professional reputation. And somewhere, buried beneath Victoria's lies and manipulation, are 2 7-year-old boys who still remember the grandfather who taught them to appreciate beauty. I am not fighting alone anymore. Victoria isolated me once. She weaponized my grief, used my trust against me, and tried to steal everything Eleanor and I built. She will never have that chance again. 2 weeks from now, we meet in court. This time, the fight isn't for money, the house, or guardianship. It's for Jackson and Noah to give their grandfather back to them, to prove that love and integrity are stronger than manipulation and lies. This time, I'm not just going to win. I'm going to make sure my grandsons know the truth about who their mother is and who I have always been. Then, on the 6th anniversary of Eleanor's passing, a letter arrived. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you what happened in those 6 months first. My life found a new rhythm. It wasn't the old rhythm from before Eleanor died, but a new one. Unexpectedly, it was good. 3 days a week, I consulted for Morrison Development, reviewing blueprints for the Brooklyn project and mentoring the young architects on Charles's team. Every Tuesday and Thursday, I taught a seminar at the Columbia University Graduate School of Architecture titled Designing for Human Flourishing. 22 eager students reminded me why I'd fallen in love with this profession 40 years ago. The house was no longer a prison. It was a home. I hired someone for the heavy cleaning, but I did most things myself. I made breakfast in the kitchen where I used to serve tea for Victoria's dinner parties. I read in Eleanor's chair by the window. I worked at the desk overlooking the ocean. She had insisted we design this house around that view. So you can always see the horizon, she'd said while we were planning the place. So you never forget there's always something wider than whatever problem you're facing. I understand now what she meant. Jackson and Noah's room was always ready. The bunk beds were made with clean sheets, and the closet was stocked with art supplies. The Lego castle they started building months ago had grown into an elaborate city sprawling across the floor. Every Tuesday and Thursday afternoon, the house was filled with their voices, arguments over whose turn it was to build the next tower, questions about how bridges worked, and laughter when I let them beat me at cards. Kenneth picked them up on Friday nights for the weekend. He'd been sober for a year and was working as a project manager at an architecture firm. He looked different, clearer, steadier. We'd settled on a 50-50 custody agreement, and it seemed to work. The boys needed their father, and Kenneth had finally become the father they needed. "Thank you," he said last month after dropping the kids off, standing in my driveway. "Thank you for not giving up on them or on me." "The hard work was yours," I told him. "I just kept the door open." Victoria was still in her Jersey City apartment, still financially tight, but making ends meet. She'd found a job as an administrative assistant at a small firm, a far cry from the executive position she dreamed of, but it paid the bills. She hadn't taken me up on the offer for therapy. Our communication was minimal, limited to the necessary logistics regarding the children's schedule. Short texts about pickup times and school events. We weren't enemies, but we weren't quite family either. We were just two people bound by love for the same children, carefully maintaining our distance. I had accepted it. Some bridges burn too completely to be rebuilt. Some relationships don't end with a dramatic finale, but with a quiet, permanent parting of ways. I'd done my part. The rest was up to her. Then the letter came. It arrived on October 15th, exactly 6 years after Eleanor passed. I had spent the entire morning at her graveside with flowers, sitting on the bench next to her, telling her about Jackson's newfound interest in engineering, Noah's artistic flair, the award gala, and the new life I'd built without her. When I got home, the envelope was on my front steps. My name and address written in handwriting I recognized, Victoria's neat script, the one she'd practiced daily in 3rd grade because Eleanor had insisted on it. I sat in Eleanor's chair and opened it. "Dear Dad, I've written this letter 17 times. Every previous version started with excuses, explanations, reasons for why I did what I did. But the truth is simpler and crueler than any explanation. I was wrong, completely, devastatingly wrong. Because of greed, I destroyed everything good in my life. Because I was too proud to ask for help. Because I was too afraid to admit I'd made a mistake. I treated you like an asset instead of a father. I taught my children not to respect you. I tried to steal the house you and Mom built together. I even almost succeeded in having you declared incompetent when you are one of the sharpest, kindest people I know. What I did cannot be undone. I know that. I am not writing to beg for forgiveness, and I'm not asking for money or anything else. I'm writing because today is Mom's anniversary. I've been thinking about her all day, about how much she loved you, about how she taught me that people are more important than possessions, about how disappointed she would be if she saw the person I'd become. I miss her. I miss the person I was before fear and greed turned me into someone I didn't even recognize. I miss my father. I don't expect a reply. I just needed you to know that I'm sorry. And I finally see what I was too blind to see before. About everything. You were right. Victoria. I read it 3 times. The first time I felt anger. Old fires reignited over everything she'd done, everything she'd tried to do, and the years she'd stolen. The second time I felt a sadness so deep it made it hard to breathe. My daughter, my only child, was so lost. The third time I felt something unexpected, a tiny, fragile flicker of hope. I called Patricia. She sent a letter of apology. What do you want to do? I don't know. Part of me wants to throw it away. Another part wants to believe people can change. They can, Patricia said cautiously. But they have to do the work. And while they're doing the work, you have to protect yourself. That night, I wrote back, just a few lines on my own stationery. Victoria, I received your letter. Thank you for writing it. I cannot forget what happened. I will not pretend the past 3 years didn't occur, and I will not pretend that trust can be rebuilt overnight. But I am willing to watch your actions and see if they match your words. That is all I can offer right now. Dad. 2 days later, my phone buzzed with a text from Victoria's number. I won't let you down this time, I promise. I stared at the words for a long time. She'd made promises before. Too many. But people can change, can't they? They can wake up one day and finally see what they've been too blind or too afraid to see. They can make different choices. 3 months later, Victoria sent another text. Can we meet? Not in court? No lawyers, just coffee, just us. There are things I need to tell you. I stood on the balcony again, watching the winter sun set over the ocean. Eleanor's words echoed in my mind. Always look at the horizon. Never forget there is always something wider than whatever problem you're facing. I replied, okay, when? We met at a small cafe in Manhattan. Not the kind of place she used to pick. No Michelin stars, no celebrity chefs. Just real coffee and pastries in a neighborhood spot with mismatched chairs and local art on the walls. It was our first real conversation in over 3 years. I arrived 10 minutes early and chose a table by the window. My hands were steadier than I expected, but my heart was racing. Patricia had offered to come with me, to wait nearby in case I needed support. I declined. This was something I needed to face alone. Victoria walked in at 2 o'clock sharp. I barely recognized her. The woman walking to my table bore almost no resemblance to the polished executive who used to host dinner parties and maneuver in boardrooms. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail. She wore jeans and a navy sweater, no jewelry except for the watch Kenneth had given her years ago, no designer bag, no expensive shoes. Her face lacked the elaborate makeup she used to paint on like armor. She somehow looked younger, but at the same time full of fear. Hi, Dad. Her voice was quiet. Victoria, please sit. We ordered coffee. Neither of us touched the menu. The silence stretched between us, not with hostility, but with a fragility, as if we were handling something that would shatter if we moved too fast. Thank you for seeing me, she finally said. I wasn't sure if you'd come. I wasn't sure I would either. She nodded, staring at her coffee cup. I don't know where to start. The letter was a start. I wrote that letter 17 times before I got it right. Every version before that was full of excuses. Blaming Kenneth's gambling, blaming financial pressure, blaming you for not helping when I needed it. She looked up, meeting my eyes. But none of that was true. Or at least, even if parts were true, that wasn't the real truth. What is the real truth? She took a deep breath. I've been in therapy twice a week for the past 6 months. Did you know that? Something shifted in my chest. No, I didn't. The moment after you refused to give me money and I left your house, I realized I had nothing left. No job, no savings, no relationship with my father, and I had almost lost my children. And yet I was still blaming everyone. You, Kenneth, Charles Morrison, the entire architectural world, everyone except myself. She pulled out a tissue, not crying yet, but preparing. My therapist asked me this question. If everyone in your life is a problem, what is the common denominator? I hated her for asking. I wanted to run out of the room, but she was right. That common denominator was me. What made you finally decide to get help? I asked. Jackson asked me a question. He said, Mom, why doesn't Grandpa come see us? Why do we always have to go to his house? I was just about to tell him it was your fault, that you were stubborn and mean. But Noah, her voice choked up. Noah looked at me with those big, serious eyes and said, That doesn't sound like something Grandpa would do. I felt my own eyes grow hot. My 7-year-old son called out my lie, and I realized they knew. They always knew that I was the problem, not you. So I called the number you gave me, the therapist you offered to pay for. I couldn't afford the full rate, but she has a sliding scale program, $60 a session. I could afford that. What have you learned in therapy? I asked cautiously. And I learned that I was terrified of being average. Watching you and Mom build such an incredible legacy made me feel like I had to be just as extraordinary, or I was worthless. I measured love by what people could do for me, rather than by who they were. I inherited Dad's ambition, but none of his integrity, and somewhere along the way, I convinced myself that as long as I could succeed, none of that mattered. She reached into her bag and pulled out an envelope. Her hand trembled as she pushed it across the table. What's this? Open it. I did. Inside was a check made out to me for $30,000, signed in her neat script. I stared at it, confused. I can't pay it all back at once, Victoria said urgently. The $400,000 I took from your accounts, but I can start. I've been working double shifts, weekends, every overtime hour I can get. I'm paying off my emergency debts first, the ones that could get us evicted or have the lights turned off. But I'm saving for this too. It'll take years, maybe 5 or 6, but I'm going to pay back every single cent. Victoria, I don't need... I know you don't. That's not the point. Her voice was firm and strong now. I need to do it. Not because it erases what I did. Not because it makes us even. But because I need to prove to myself that I can do something difficult. Something that takes years. Something that requires discipline and sacrifice. I need to become the kind of person who pays her debts, not just financial ones. I looked at the check, then at my daughter. You're really doing the work. I am. Some days I hate it. Some days I want to quit therapy, to slide back into the old habit of blaming everyone else because it's easier. But I keep going, because... She dabbed her eyes. Because I want my sons to have a mother they can be proud of. And I want to look in the mirror and not see the woman who tried to steal her own father's house. We sat in silence for a while. The cafe buzzed with other conversations, the espresso machine hissed. Ordinary life happened all around us while we navigated this extraordinary moment. I'm not ready for family dinners at the house, I said carefully. I'm not ready to pretend the past 3 years didn't happen, or that trust can be rebuilt overnight. I know, but I'm grateful for this. The therapy, the check, the conversation. I'm grateful you're trying. Is this enough for now? I thought of Eleanor, of what she would say if she were here. I thought of the kids, the life I'd built, and the boundaries that had saved me. I thought of how people can change, but that change is a process, not an isolated event. For now, I said, it's enough. Victoria's face crumbled. She covered her face with her hands, her shoulders shaking with sobs. Sobs she'd been holding in for months, maybe years. I reached across the table and placed my hand on her arm. Not a hug, not absolution, just contact, a connection, a bridge starting to form across the canyon we'd created. When she finally looked up, tears without mascara tracked down her face. I said something I hadn't said in over a year. I'm proud of you for being willing to try, Victoria. It takes courage. She nodded, unable to speak. We finished our coffee, making no plans for the next time, but not ruling it out, either. As she left, she squeezed my hand briefly. Thank you, Dad. Thank you for not giving up on me completely. You're my daughter. I never gave up. I just had to protect myself while you figured things out. After she left, I sat alone, my cooling coffee and the check on the table. $30,000. The first installment of a debt that would take years to repay. But this wasn't about money. It never was. It was about Victoria learning that actions have consequences, that integrity is more important than success, and that love is something you prove by making hard choices over time. Lessons I'd hoped I'd taught her better when she was little, and now she was finally learning them the hard way. I took out my phone and called Kenneth. Hey, Theodore, are the kids okay? The kids are fine. I just had coffee with Victoria. There was a pause on the other end. Oh, how did it go? I looked out at the Manhattan streets, at the passers-by, all with their own complicated lives, broken relationships, and small acts of courage. Unexpectedly, I said, hopeful. Really? She's in therapy. She's paying back the money she stole. She's doing the work, Kenneth. Real work. His voice choked up. That's great. That's really great. The boys will be so happy to hear that you two are talking again. We're not there yet. There's a long road to truly being a family again, but maybe we're on the path. After hanging up, I sat there absorbing that thought. On the path, not the finish line, not some fantasy where everything is perfect and all wounds are healed. Just one step at a time on the path. One conversation, one check, one moment of genuine tears. It would take another 3 years before all of us, me, Victoria, Kenneth, Jackson, Noah, would be able to sit in the same room without court orders, without supervised visitation, without lawyers drafting agreements. 3 years of therapy, repayment checks, awkward coffee meetings, and slow, painful growth. But it was a beginning, and sometimes a beginning is all you can ask for. 3 years after I reclaimed the house, Jackson turned 10. For the first time since everything fell apart, our whole family sat in the same room. The backyard was filled with the sound of children. Jackson and Noah's school friends were running through the garden Eleanor and I had planted decades ago. The red maples were in the height of their autumn color. The very trees that had witnessed Eleanor's last afternoon now rustled in the noise of laughter, soccer balls, and birthday party chaos. Jackson and Noah were almost unrecognizable from the frightened 7-year-olds who had been caught in their mother's war. At 10, they were confident, curious, and kind. Jackson wanted to be an engineer. Noah still loved to draw. His sketches of bridges and buildings were plastered all over his room upstairs. They'd spent last weekend helping me build a model of the Brooklyn project, asking me questions about load-bearing walls and foundation design. I was setting out plates on the outdoor table when I heard the side door open. Victoria walked in with a wrapped gift, her steps hesitant. She'd cut her hair short. She looked professional but unpretentious. Blazer and jeans, simple jewelry. 3 years of therapy and hard work had changed more than just her wardrobe. Our eyes met across the yard. I walked over and opened my arms. She stepped in and I hugged her. Brief, but real. "Welcome home, Victoria." Her breath hitched. "Thank you, Dad." The party unfolded around us. Charles Morrison was there with his wife, telling Jackson stories about the legendary Harbor Towers his grandfather had designed. Patricia Hayes and Daniel Foster were sitting together, both looking relieved that the crisis they'd helped navigate had finally resolved. Kenneth was there with his girlfriend, a kind woman who taught elementary school whom the kids adored. He caught my eye and nodded, a silent acknowledgement of how far we'd all come. Kenneth had been sober for 4 years now. He and Victoria had divorced amicably 2 years ago. They'd finally matured enough to realize they'd never been a good fit, but they had become excellent co-parents. I watched them coordinate schedules, attend school parent-teacher conferences together, and divide holidays fairly. They'd learned to put Jackson and Noah first. Around 3 o'clock, Victoria found me by the drink table. She pulled an envelope from her bag. "The last one," she said softly. I opened it. A check for $8,000, the final installment of the $400,000 she'd stolen. "You did it," I said. "Took me 3 years and every hour of overtime I could get. But yes, I did." She looked at me. "I had to finish this before today, before Jackson's party. I had to walk into this house without that debt hanging over me. How does it feel?" "It feels like I can finally breathe." She scanned the yard, seeing Patricia watching us. I told her the same thing earlier. She said you'd be proud of me. "I am proud of you." Later, as the sun began to set and the kids were scrambling for birthday cake, I stood up and tapped my glass. The conversation quieted down. "I'd like to say a few words," I began. 3 years ago, this house wasn't a home anymore. It was just a building. Beautiful, yes, but missing the most important things. I was here alone, trying to reclaim not just the property, but my life, my dignity, and my relationship with my grandsons. I looked around at the faces gathered in my backyard. Today this house is a home again, not because I won some lawsuit, though I did, but because the people who matter are here, because my grandsons know their grandfather loves them, because old friends showed up when I needed them. I nodded toward Charles, Patricia, and Daniel, and because family, even after it breaks, can sometimes heal. My gaze found Victoria. She was crying silently, one hand over her mouth. "I am grateful for second chances," I said, "grateful for the chance to be better than I was, to love more wisely, to set the boundaries that protected me while leaving a door open for change. And I am grateful to everyone here who believed that change was possible. I raised my glass. To Jackson, happy 10th birthday, and to everyone here. We've learned that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. Forgiveness is choosing hope, day after day, instead of bitterness. Cheers, Charles said, and everyone drank. After the guests had gone and the kids were inside playing video games, Victoria and I cleaned up together. We worked in a comfortable silence, gathering plates and cups, folding chairs. Kenneth's girlfriend had already taken Kenneth home. Patricia had hugged me goodnight, and the house was settling into the quiet of the night. I got a promotion, Victoria said suddenly. Senior Director of Operations 3 months ago. I didn't tell you because I wanted to make sure it was solid, that I'd earned it through my work, not through connections or manipulation. That's fantastic, Victoria, really. It's strange, though. Everything I used to want, status, money, recognition, I have some of it now, but it feels different. Better because I know I earned it honestly, because I'm not trying to prove anything to anyone anymore, except myself. I set down a stack of plates. Will you come for Thanksgiving? You, Kenneth, the kids, just family. She looked startled. Really? Really, if you want to. I do. She wiped her eyes. Dad, I know I've said it before, but I need you to hear it one more time. I'm sorry for everything, and I love you. I gave her a real hug this time, not the brief greeting from earlier, but the kind of hug a father gives his daughter. I love you too. That night, after everyone had left and the house was quiet, I stood on the balcony looking up at the stars. Eleanor and I used to do this, count constellations, make up stories about the patterns, dream about the future. We did it, I said to her, to the night sky, and to myself. The house is ours again. Victoria is finding her way. The kids are happy. Kenneth is staying sober and building a good life. The house behind me truly belonged to me, not just legally, but emotionally. Every room held new memories, better memories now. The reading nook where I spent Sunday mornings with the kids. The kitchen where we made pancakes together. The office where I worked on projects that excited me. The master bedroom where I slept soundly, without fear or resentment. Victoria was finding her way as my daughter, not the daughter she was before. That innocence was gone forever. But she was a new person, a tougher, truer person. Someone who had faced the worst of herself and chosen to change. I was free. Not from the past. Those scars would always be a part of me. But I was free from the past's hold. Free from the bitterness. Free to love my grandsons, enjoy my work, build new relationships, and mourn Eleanor without being a prisoner to grief. And I realized that was enough. Almost enough. I had one last thing to do. The final piece of the puzzle needed an ending. Tomorrow I would make that call. Tomorrow I would start the final chapter. But tonight I stood under Eleanor's stars, feeling perfectly at peace for the first time in 6 years. 6 years after Eleanor passed, I finally understood what she had always tried to teach me. A legacy isn't built on blueprints. It's written in the hearts of the people we love. Tonight, sitting at the mahogany desk Eleanor and I designed together, I write this letter so Jackson and Noah will see it when they are older and ready to read it. Eleanor's silver cufflinks sit next to the stationery. During every battle, the guardianship, the hearings, the visitation, the struggle, the long road to regaining my dignity, they were glinting nearby. They remind me of what I almost lost and how hard I had to fight to get it all back. I want my grandsons to know the 5 truths I learned the hard way. First, kindness is not weakness, but never let anyone mistake it for compliance. When Eleanor passed, I thought being open-hearted to Victoria was a tribute to my wife's memory. I thought generosity meant saying yes to every demand, enduring every slight, and carrying every burden. I was wrong. Kindness without boundaries isn't love, it's self-destruction. Victoria didn't see a generous father. She saw a resource to be drained. The moment I stopped defending my own dignity, she took everything. My bedroom, my place at the table, my voice in my own home. Boys, be kind, be generous. But the moment someone treats your kindness as weakness, draw a line. Compassion at the expense of your self-respect isn't compassion, it's surrender. Second, boundaries are not cruel. They are the highest form of love. For 2 years, I told myself that saying no to Victoria was selfish, and that a good father sacrifices everything. I was so afraid of being called difficult or ungrateful that I let her walk all over me. It nearly destroyed me. It wasn't until the day I finally said no, when I refused to sign away my assets, when I stood up in court, when I told Victoria I wouldn't give her cash without accountability, that things changed. I thought I was being harsh. I wasn't. I was teaching her that love doesn't mean enabling someone's worst impulses. Setting boundaries saved us both. It forced Victoria to face herself, and it gave me my life back. Boys, remember, sometimes saying no to the people you love is the most loving thing you can do. Third, forgiveness does not mean forgetting. 3 years after I reclaimed the house, Victoria sent me a letter. She apologized. She started therapy. She repaid $30,000 of the $400,000 she'd stolen. I forgave her, not because she deserved it, but because I needed to let go of the anger that was consuming me. Forgiveness set me free, but I don't trust Victoria the way I used to. I look at her actions, not just her words. I rebuilt our relationship slowly, cautiously, and with clear boundaries. Forgiveness and trust are not the same thing. One you can choose to give, the other must be earned. Boys, if someone hurts you, you can forgive them, but still protect yourself. Forgiveness is for your peace, not to give them convenience. Fourth, your legacy is not what you own, but who you love. I spent 40 years building a $95 million architectural empire. I designed towers that touched the sky, estates that graced magazine covers. I used to think those buildings were my legacy. I was wrong. When Victoria tried to take my house, I nearly let it destroy me. I realized that being attached to property was poisoning my relationships. Houses don't matter. What matters is that you boys feel safe, that you know Grandpa loves you, and that you grow up understanding what a real family is. Boys, build your careers, create beautiful things, but never let your possessions define you. People will remember how you made them feel, not what you owned. Fifth, it is never too late to start over. I was 60 years old when I stood in court fighting for my life. 60. Most people would say that's too old to rebuild. They were wrong. I took a consulting job. I mentored young architects. I won my visitation rights. I restored my home and my reputation. Starting over at 60 taught me that resilience has no expiration date. Boys, if life knocks you down, and it surely will, stand up. Whether you are 20, 60, or 80, you can always choose to start again. My phone buzzed on the desk. Victoria's name lit up the screen. I answered. "Hi, Dad." Her voice was soft, a little unsure, but warm. "Just wanted to say goodnight. The boys are asleep. They had so much fun at the party." "I'm glad," I told her. "Thank you for bringing them. It's the least I could do. They love you." A pause. "I love you too, Dad." "I love you too, sweetheart." We hung up. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out over the Atlantic under the moonlight. Eleanor's photo sat on the windowsill, her smile frozen in time. I picked it up and traced her face with my thumb. "We did it," I whispered. "Not perfectly, but it's okay." I put the photo down and walked back to the desk. The letter to Jackson and Noah was waiting, almost finished. At my daughter's dinner party, she introduced me as a caretaker. It cost me everything, my dignity, my home, and nearly my relationship with you. But fighting back gave me something priceless. It taught me that even if I lost everything, I could still stand tall. Even if I was humiliated, I could still rise again. It taught me that love, true love, requires both forgiveness and boundaries. That is the legacy I leave you. Not an architectural empire, not a Hampton estate, but this resilience, this love, and the courage to say no when necessary. I hope you never have to experience these lessons the way I did. But if you ever do, know that your grandfather fought his way back, and so can you. I signed the letter, folded it carefully, and tucked it into an envelope labeled, "To Jackson and Noah, when you are ready." Outside the window, the sea churned. endless and patient. Inside, the house was peaceful, whole, and finally, once again, mine. Looking back on my journey, I see a man who nearly lost everything because he wouldn't say one simple word: no. Family betrayal cuts deeper than the cruelty of any stranger. It comes from the people you raised, the people who know exactly where to twist the knife. When Victoria labeled me a caretaker, she erased 60 years of sacrifice and accomplishment with one sentence: don't be like me. Do not mistake silence for peace or sacrifice for love. I ignored every red flag: the occupied bedroom, the erased photos, the forged signatures, because I was terrified of conflict. That fear nearly cost me my home, my grandsons, and my dignity. Stories like mine of grandparents aren't rare. They are hidden in silence, buried in shame. Too many seniors suffer family betrayal in silent desperation, believing they deserve it. Here's what I learned. Boundaries are not walls. They are bridges that protect relationships by demanding respect. Forgiveness is not weakness, but it must walk hand in hand with accountability. A legacy is not the empire you build or the house you own. It is whether your grandchildren remember you stood for something. God gave me Eleanor for 33 years. When she died, I thought my purpose had died with her. I was wrong. He gave me 6 more years to teach me that love without self-respect is martyrdom, not virtue. The story of a grandfather who stands tall is more important than the story of one who bows down. If you see yourself in the early chapters of my story, the people pleaser, the silent martyr, stop. Draw that line today. Betrayal by family taught me that your kindness is a gift, not a ransom. You must protect it with everything you have, because those who truly love you will never ask you to destroy yourself to prove your devotion. Your voice matters. Your boundaries matter. You matter. Thank you for walking this journey with me. Please share your thoughts in the comments section below. If you were in Theodore's shoes, facing such immense pressure from your own family, what would you have done? I truly want to hear your perspective. If this story resonated with you, consider subscribing for future content. As a quick reminder, while the inspiration is drawn from patterns in real-world dynamics concerning the elderly, some details have been dramatized for narrative purposes. If this isn't your preferred style, don't worry. There are plenty of other videos to explore.